Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Me? Not me yet. Folks, welcome back to the show where, as you can see, sometimes we do get our signals crossed, but our swords always are. It is the Crossing Swords podcast, the official Sabres podcast of Trainwreck Sports, sponsored by, of course, the place to buy a case, Outlet Liquor. Make sure you get there, George Urban Boulevard in Cheektowaga. But speaking of stuff happening, speaking of nonstop action, that can sum up the Sabres, because a week where they're supposed to have off, we have action out the wazoo with Dahlin at the All-Star game, beach vacations, and All-Star extension numbers. Let's take a look at the panel. Let's bring them in. We got Gatesy 35 and we got intern Vinny. Gents, hope you are enjoying your vacation week. But I guess what was your initial thought when you saw that Cozy was here to stay for another 7 years yesterday? You saw that come across your timeline. Gatesy, you're mic'd and you're muted and it won't let me unmute you. Damn you. Damn you with getting these signals crossed.
Signals are crossed. We're starting off hot. And, I'm just so excited to talk about this Cozens deal because it's something I think fans wanted. They lock up these young guys now while they can. He's showing signs of progression. He's almost a point per game, that second-line center role. His game's developed on both ends of the ice. And the fact that, Kevin with a Y can lock these guys up when he can now before prices get a little crazy. We've seen it with Tage, seen it now with Samuelson, hopefully with Cozens here. Like, something exciting for the future.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see that the roster of this team is maybe getting built in a similar way to some of the powerhouses in the East that we're looking at right now, like the Bruins and like the Tampa Bay Lightning. When you can start to see these things form, obviously no team is ever identical, but the fact that we're starting to set the blocks to maybe try to be set up like that over the next couple of years is very exciting to see sort of come to fruition where it hasn't done that in, almost a decade now.
Yeah. I mean, talk about salary cap hell. I mean, after Murray left, after, Botterill was gone. And, I think looking back at it, Botterill might not have been far off with the roster of where it needed to be, but unfortunately he had Housley, he had Kruger, and that was ultimately the death knell with that record. But, you look at, that situation they were in, Evander Kane. I mean, they were paying, Aroff, it felt like, up until a couple of years ago, things like that. But now you look at the way they're building this roster, like you said, Kevin with a Y. There were some dark days not too long ago. I don't want to, march the victory parade out here, but the consensus for anyone who actually knows inside the Buffalo market is this is like a potentially steal. And that's the crazy thing, because you look at Dylan Cozens' career numbers, it kind of reminds me of the Samuelson deal, you're looking at career games played and goal or Tage, similar thing with the goals for the overall pay. You look at Dylan's numbers. I mean, yeah, he's not even 22. His birthday is tomorrow. So happy early birthday to Dylan Cozens. But is there any hesitation between any of you on this deal?
I mean, I think we all have the thought in the back of our mind of like, what if? But you could say that for any contract. You look at the Jeff Skinner deal that was done a couple years ago. Everyone wanted him signed. The biggest deal. Look, a couple years later, it's like, I can't believe we're stuck with this for however many more years. And that's the thing with these longer contracts. You have your ebbs and flows with them. And I think with the Cozens deal, it's going to be hard not to miss with, knock on wood, with the way he's been playing these past couple of years, and this year especially.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's similar with like the Thompson deal in that it's now just like at the current moment, they both look really, really awesome, right? Going back to when the Thompson deal was signed, I remember most people were saying like this could be a really, really great contract. However, at the time it was the off season, so you were looking at a situation where like if he doesn't come out and produce the way he did that year, like if it was just a fluke year, then you're looking at this was actually a huge mistake, right? Whereas now with the Cozens deal, you've seen him play relatively well last year, and he's continued to produce at a successful level this year. And you can see him continuing to do that for the rest of the season. And then he's earned that contract. I don't like comparing to the Skinner deal because the Skinner deal was, again, a player finally produces on the Eichel line. At the time, you need to keep Jack happy because he is your franchise player. You're not just going to like let that player go. So you sign him to the contract you sort of have to sign him to. And of course, you get burned because for the next 2 years, he's playing terrible minutes on a terrible line and he can't produce because his coaching staff is terrible. Now, I mean, is the contract great? No, but like he's actually producing at a high level now, way better than he was, back when he was 36 points. So I don't think contractually this is a worst case scenario at all. I'm really happy with how this one worked out because again, right now it looks pretty good. And again, 3 years down the road, this might look really, really good.
Yeah. It's funny what a flip it is because I would say rightfully so, and lack of a better term, I think Sabres fans have had PTSD about these 5+ year contracts. I mean, when you look at what happened with Aroff, Myers, Skinner ended up even like the Vanek deal, the way it went down, despite him being so good, left kind of like a sour taste in fans' mouths because it was on the edge of the Briere and the Drury situation. But yeah, you look at it, Cozens to me, I mean, he was shot out of a cannon his rookie year. I mean, it doesn't really reflect in his numbers when you look at him here, 4 goals, 9 assists in 41 games. But it felt like he was just constantly in the mix for a team that was never in the mix. Then last year, it felt like he was really getting a lot of scoring opportunities. And I said this with respect to him. He was playing with a mop out there. He was constantly in good scoring position, but he couldn't finish. And now this year, you're seeing the whole enchilada. Literally, you're seeing him in the mix. You're seeing him getting those scoring opportunities, and he's finishing with a flourish. So you love to see it. And to me, the funny thing about finishing with a flourish is it's exactly what Kevin with a Y is doing right now. To me, he is that guy. I mean, I don't want to, again, early returns are early returns. There's still 80% plus left on these Thompson, Samuelson, more than that, 90% plus left on these deals. But you have to think that the initial returns, when they're looking down the line now in the second half of the 2020s, that they're, salivating at what they might be able to do, with the Power contract, with the Dahlin deal down the line. And yeah, this is just a piece of that. So you love to see them building up. Really good article, by the way, by Joe Yerdon. And I'm talking about how the Sabres are building that roster and how it's not apparent. And it makes sense. I think if you're looking at this as a writer for the Edmonton Oilers, you're seeing a guy with 34 career goals get almost $50 million. Like, that's definitely a little crazy. That's a little crazy. But I think when you're the Sabres and that this guy is literally 21 years and 364 days old, and he's only going to continuously get better and continue to improve, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Yeah, it just keeps it exciting, and it's going to be not even a bit of a gamble. It's just, I think Sabres fans are happy with, even if Cozens almost plateaus a bit, it's going to be good.
Yeah, if he hangs right around these numbers, like if he stops scoring right now, but if he paces the year out and then continues to just play at that pace, it's still a really good contract, assuming, of course, that the cap continues to go up. And now, obviously, we know that in the NFL, for example, the cap is going to continue to skyrocket, which is why, the Bills fans don't necessarily have to be concerned about the Allen contract because, eventually the TV deals are going to bail you. I'll use the word bail you out of that, but I mean, every good football team has a really good quarterback.
The Patriots are debating on whether giving Mac Jones a $34 million deal. So right. You got to love where the Bills are at with Allen and that $45 million contract for sure.
Right. So, but I just want to finish that off by saying the NHL is not in a great spot in terms of revenue and then just fan interaction right now. So the only thing that concerns me is that if the cap doesn't move as much as it will in like other sports, like the NFL, for example. You might run into a spot where you're running out of money faster than you thought you were. But if anybody were to be in a good position and prepared for that, it would be the Buffalo Sabres because of how their roster is constructed at this current moment. But again, we can talk about like the lack of, streams and the lack of people tuning in and the broadcast ratings for the NHL. All of those things eventually sort of might lead to the league is getting, I'll call it, less popular. So you might need to be a little bit concerned about where that cap balloons or doesn't balloon to over the next couple of years. But other than that, if it continues along the trajectory it's supposed to, these contracts, especially even if Cozens plateaus, are going to look perfectly fine.
And with the way the Sabres contracts are now, like even if the worst case scenario happens with the cap, the Sabres are looking incredible compared to so many other teams in the league. It's really a win-win for them.
Remember when the Sabres didn't have a captain candidate that you could really get behind? Now you got Cozens, you got Tuck,
Give one to everyone.
you got Dahlin. I mean, there's gonna be no shortage of. I mean, this core. I'll tell you what. I mean, this is what you need. I mean, and again, you still got to hit, and these guys still got to continue to ascend. I mean, yeah, you would almost take. Like, what's the average year you would take from Cozens on this deal? Like, I mean, would you take 24 goals a year and 75 points a year?
I mean, I think that's where he's at right now. He's almost a point per game. He's already at 7 goals.
That would be plateauing for this year, for sure. But instead, he's 21 years old and probably only going to get better. 22 tomorrow, folks.
Big day.
I wonder what he's going to – I wonder if for his birthday, because he just got the new contract, how that offsets, right? Like normally when you get paid, you take everybody else out to dinner, but because it's because it's your birthday, then everybody else takes you out to dinner. So just cancel, like everybody, like BYOB somewhere and figure it out. I don't know how that works.
Speaking of which, let me fire this up. It would be remiss not to show this. Obviously, this is great. So you've been seeing him on, as the title of our podcast shows. The boys are out on the beach, and it looks like they celebrated with some shots.
Man.
Dahlin, is that so? Dahlin made it out there after the All-Star game. You'll have to see that. So this was my question: Dahlin was obviously booked for this vacation before, had to go to the All-Star game, and Tage just kind of took his spot, even though he was injured, because you saw Tage chucking the football on the beach.
Yeah, he might have taken the Josh Allen approach to the All-Star game, Pro Bowl, taking some time. Rasmus, you know what? This is 30. You're going to the All-Star game representing the Sabres. Keep it going. And it seems like it's a tight group that enjoy each other. So I'm glad, that you're seeing them on vacation all together. I think that's a great sign of a good team now and a great team to come. So,
wait, how the hell did we get to this unformatted thing that shows my home? Get the hell out of here. By the way, I got to get my big head in here. I got to get my big head presence going. By the way, exactly like you said, and I couldn't have said it better myself. It really is telling that these guys, not very much free time all year in their entire year, but they get 1 week and they're, vacationing. I hate to say it, but a certain number 9 couldn't wait to get to Turks and Caicos by himself in years past and take a week off. So, there's a big difference there. Whether you want to admit the effect it has or not. Speaking of the effect it has or not, by the way, shout out Chad D and Expected Buffalo on that Cozens extension news. Mm-hmm. It's a good jump to our next topic, by the way, seeing Dahlin on the beach. I'm always glad to have a Buffalo representative in an All-Star game. I think Dahlin, Tage, deserved it. Even maybe some of the other guys got looked over a little bit, based on the team's record. With that said, man, what a lame production. What did you guys think? To me, the one thing I could not stop thinking was that if you were turning into the NHL for the first time and this was like the All-Star game, you'd be like, I'm out on the NHL, because it just looked lame. Everyone looked disinterested. It did not look fun at all, was my take.
I mean, it's a tough situation to kind of deal with it for the NHL. If you see what the NFL did this year with the Pro Bowl, how it's flag football, and it's people complained before because it wasn't real football, and now people kind of wish that's back. You're not going to please people with this weekend. Get the kids happy. I think that's what they're really looking for to do. They're trying to grow their game, and I guess we'll see. I mean, I don't think we're the right clientele to decide if that's growing the game right now, because we're pretty locked into the Sabres and the NHL as a whole, but maybe this brought in some new fans to the sport. But
Yeah. That's a good point, Gatesy. I'm going to piggyback off that by saying I think they're trying to grow to a certain demographic that I don't think that we really have a great connection to right now. So I don't know. I'd have to ask some younger NHL and sports fans to see if they enjoyed the All-Star festivities or if they even watched them. Like, I don't know if they were even able to see them or if they wanted to. To me, it felt like it wasn't even marketed all that well.
They saw the clips on TikTok, Vinny. Don't worry.
Well, I guess so. Again, like my point is like, is that really where? If the NHL wants that to be the case, right? Like you put all these festivities on, and you just want the interaction on social media later. That's all well and good if that's what you're striving for, and you set up your brand and your market plan to produce revenue off of that. But if your revenue plan is really contingent on you making broadcast money from the ratings of the actual live events, and most of your interactions are coming from after the All-Star game on social media, like that's, again, like if that's not what you plan for, then that's a poorly executed plan. So I didn't think the All-Star game was even marketed all that well. I mean, I feel like I didn't really hear all that much about it. Like if somebody like me who's a sports fan has to go out of the way to figure out what time all of this stuff is happening, like that's probably not great, because I feel like you're maybe I'm not looking in the right spots. I don't know. But I mean, with that said, I feel like you got to do a better job of marketing it to people who would even be a little bit remotely interested in watching. Because when your team is off for a week, the whole point is like, hey, my team's not playing hockey for a week. I want to watch sports. And sports is the All-Star game maybe. But it really wasn't the case this week. I had to go out of my way to find ways and the times to go and watch it.
This is not just because this is the Dominator, but this is electric. If I was tuning into this and I was surfing the channels, I just saw people coming in nonstop on Dominic Hasek like this. I mean, come on.
Yeah, like a little 10-puck in practice. You can't beat it. Just something quick like that, and I think it gets the most out of the players too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see guys out there just having fun, which is great, but I think as a fan, I like seeing the best of the best be the best in the world for a reason.
I don't know if you need more incentives to make the players try hard. I think the modern game is so like, I think there's and rightfully so, right? In all sports, there's an emphasis on health. I mean, you can talk about the NFL, obviously, with CTE, and then a lot of other things regarding just players' health in general. The NBA with like star players being rested more, and then you have people like traveling to these games to see Jimmy Butler, and he's sitting because he's got back soreness and all that. You can have all of these different conversations, right, about player health. And player health is a good thing, because when you go to a game, I want to watch the healthy good players play the healthy good players. Like I don't want to go to a game and like, oh yeah, maybe my team wins because the other team's starting goalie is hurt, but like while it's a win, it's not, it's an asterisk, right? I want to see the good players beat the good play. Like I want to see the best of the best play the best of the best. And when you are doing things to sacrifice player health, then you're not doing that, right? But with that said, players, I think you need to find a balance where the All-Star game and these festivities matter, where players aren't just like, well, I don't want to get hurt or I don't want to do anything too ridiculous, so I'm just going to sort of scale it back. You want to make it fun and also make it competitive, where like people are going to want to try for whatever comes at the end as a reward or lack thereof for winning or losing.
And obviously you can go too far in the MLB All-Star Games case and end up having World Series home field advantage decided by the All-Star Game, which makes zero sense because of a one-year tie catastrophe. But with that said, the funny thing is, I think that the NHL actually has it kind of figured out. You run it 3-on-3 where you're not really getting hits. Nobody's really like colliding or anything. So it's just guys skating fast. And all of them are only skating like 90 to 95% of the time anyway. And the skills competition. That's what everyone wants to see. But for some reason, I'm telling you, I was just watching. And during the skills competition, there was no like vibes of like the guys like laughing. Like you were like I know they did Crosby, Ovechkin, and Ovechkin's kid. But like I didn't see Crosby, Ovechkin like having fun or whatever, like just stuff that you would think like you would really encourage with the All-Star game. So again, it's like you guys said, the NHL definitely has an image problem as far as building out. Yeah. And they're trying to work to combat that and obviously find a way, quote unquote. But yeah, I mean, if Bettman and Manfred think that they can just like Goodell their way like to the finish line, they're gonna get something like completely rude awakening for sure, because they're not printing money like the NFL is.
I'll say it now. The winner of the All-Star game next year, I think they have an open invite to come on the Crossing Swords podcast. I think that could be a great way to boost competition.
Seriously.
MVP next year has the invite to come.
Yes,
Yeah,
MVP
I
has
like
the
that
invites coming. The winning goaltender gets to go on Bacon, Egg, and Captain.
Yeah.
Speaking of a great opportunity, Sabres have a great opportunity in the second half of the season. What do we got? 30-plus games, 35-ish? It throws me off. We were talking about this in the pregame, that they have this break and they're like losing games when they're already behind games. Like they're basically going to be playing at a rapid pace in the second half, huh?
Mm-hmm. I think they have 32 games left of the season, and they're already
32.
4 games in hand on some teams for the wild card spot. It's crazy.
Yeah, so the bad news is in the second half forecast, as a lot of writers have pointed out, basically these 2 or 3 days where teams have started playing, the Islanders have gone 2-0. Pittsburgh went 1-0, I believe, and I think maybe the Capitals went 1-0, but you still have games in hand, like you said. The only one that they're really beaten by right now is the Pittsburgh Penguins. If they win their next 2 games, they'll be in a spot above the Islanders and above the Capitals with a game in hand still. So the Sabres really control their own destiny. Again, like it sounds ridiculous to say, even think about it, with 30 games out, but that's something they really haven't done in recent Februarys. So with that said, we do this all the time before like a matchup against Connor Hellebuck or something. You're, Kevin Adams, you're Don Granato, you're this coaching staff, you're this, leadership committee. What is your focus in the second half of the season? Where is there an advantage to be had? Is it just staying the course? Like, what are you telling to these guys? What are you thinking behind closed doors?
I mean, right now, so many people are saying the faults of the Sabres team is that they're young. They should use that to their advantage. They have so many games to be played, 32 games left in the season, and we see how this team does when they get hot. And you got these young kids that, we say they're kids. They've been playing this game for almost 20 years now, some of the younger ones, and I think they're poised to make that run here. There's a lot of guys on this team who've been here through some dark days in the franchise. I think they can really instill some leadership to not only what it means to the 23 guys on the roster, but the whole city of Buffalo as a whole on what not only making the playoffs would do, but maybe even going on some sort of run once they do get there.
Yeah, I don't think making the playoffs this year is a make it or break it situation for the Sabres, but I think it'd be such a great opportunity to propel them forward so that they can have playoff success in the future. When you look at the way this team is constructed, they're not really a team that's built to make a long run in the playoffs. Because they are incredibly streaky in sort of a bad way. They can get hot, but I don't think they can get hot in the way that you need to be in the playoffs. You need to be more physical, and you need to be able to grind out wins. You're not going to be able to win games 6-2 in the playoffs. Now, it might happen once. You might go out game 2, against Toronto, win 6-2 and go, oh, wow. But also...
can you imagine coming back to Buffalo 1-1 against the Leafs?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably best case scenario. You're more than likely going to have to go into the playoffs and face a team like Boston or like Tampa Bay that's so much better at playing that playoff hockey, and you're at a real disadvantage. However, even if you get swept or maybe lose 4 out of 5, you then know you get a taste of what it's like. To use a quote from the other guys, like, we've tasted that and we're now building apparatus, right? You go into the offseason and go, we now know what it's like. We won 1 game, okay? We now know what playoff hockey is like. Every team amps it all up a little bit. So then you get that experience and you go into the offseason, you go into next season and go, all right, like, let's get hot. Let's get in with a better seed. So we're maybe playing a team that's less put together next year instead of just squeaking in and being the last team in. And then you can play playoff hockey knowing, all right, we got to get grittier off the bat. Like, we got to go out first shift and not try to, toe drag Charlie McAvoy at the blue line. Like, maybe just try to dump it in, lay some bodies on there and just play a little bit more old school hockey for a couple minutes, get physical, and then show them that they're not just going to push us around. That's probably the more realistic outlook. But of course, you got to make the playoffs to really get a taste of what that's going to be like. Sitting at, just being that first team out would be a great step forward, but you're not going to get the feeling for the playoffs sitting on the couch at home.
And I think there's so many people too that just think this is the same old Sabres that are going to find a way to shoot themselves in the foot at some point in the season. And they say it might not happen yet because normally it does happen in November, October, but they think it might happen in this backstretch of the season. So if this team could at least prove to themselves that this is a different Sabres team of the past decade. That it's a new turn on the book, and I think this is big for them to just prove that they are a new organization now.
You guys, I think you guys put it perfectly. Just real quick to jump in. Like, playoffs is not like playoffs or bust if they don't make it or something. You know, Granado or Kevin are going to be in trouble. But it's exactly, and fans hate this because you got to compartmentalize both. It's almost exactly like the 2017 Bills. Yeah. If the Bills didn't make the playoffs that year, it wasn't like McDermott was going to be like, you know, shit canned or on the hot seat or whatever. But it's a great opportunity to get a ton of goodwill, get the monkey off the back, and really refocus the overall aim of the franchise.
Yeah, and now I will say it's an uphill battle not only having to play that many games. If you get caught in a rut, it's going to be a lot easier to lose a lot of games in a row now than it was at the beginning of the year because you might feel that extra pressure. You've got a lot more games jam-packed on, so you've got fatigue being added in along with the other effects of just that young, inexperienced nature that a lot of people are talking about with the Sabres. Now, with that said, the other factor and variable you have to consider is the teams you're going up against are those teams with playoff experience. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a team that aren't really as good as they were 4 years ago. However, playoff Sidney Crosby and playoff push Sidney Crosby is a different animal than regular season Sidney Crosby, right?
Annoying.
The Washington Capitals, 3 of their best players have played less than half of their games right now. Tom Wilson's only played 8 games. And, I'm just looking at TJ Oshie's only played 35. Nicholas Bastrom's only played 10. So when you're looking at this team that's like, you're trying to chase them, they're getting 2 of their more talented players back into the lineup here in the more important times of the season. So, it gets harder for you, not to mention the Penguins with a lot of experience on that team. That's an old roster, but that they've got a lot of experience. And then the Islanders, same thing. That's a gritty team that can win tight, close games when they need to win them. Now, it's not Barry Trotz, but still.
This is very troublesome, guys. You're saying you make great points. To hell with your diligence. I'm not very excited about it. But speaking of which, goalie outlook in the second half. It's obviously the biggest concern. Like you said, Sabres could easily get in a rut. There are 62 days between now and the end of the NHL season for the Sabres, and they have 32 games in that span. So they are averaging literally more than a game every other night. It's insane, and they're going to need goalie stability. Looking at it going into the break, Upi, he goal-attended for 8 of the last 11 games. Are you thinking a similar forecast for the remainder of the schedule? Are we thinking a lot of Comrie early so we can get a lot of UPL late? What's the play?
I think it's still going to be pretty UPL heavy, but not to the extent that it was. I think the big issue right before break was they're still getting Comrie back to game form after being out for so long. And I've been saying this for so long to slowly start phasing Anderson out, but every time I say that, he puts up monster numbers in that next game. So at some point, I'm going to be right with that. But if they can put him out there when he can and he plays well, I don't see an issue with running these 3 guys until the end of the year.
By the way, Gatesy was referencing his last prediction, and then Anderson goes out and basically stands on his head against Dallas, holding them to 2 goals and winning for OT and for the Sabres. Go ahead, Vinny.
Yeah, no, I was saying a similar thing in that I think that game I also predicted that Anderson's not going to be a goalie you can go out and depend on you to make 45 saves a game. And he went out, I think he had like 37 saves, which is, not that far off.
You're right.
So when you look at, was it 37?
I meant you're right with your prediction. You didn't get 45 that night.
Yeah. Okay, well, hey, win some, you lose some. But look, when you look at the way the Sabres are probably going to plan for the end of this year, I'm assuming they're going to go something similar to the tune of UPL, Anderson, UPL, Comrie, Anderson, UPL, like do like a 2-1-1-1-2-1, if that makes sense, right? To merge forechecking terms together.
So let me get real quick then, boys. Give it to me. Give me the piece of the pie percentages for the remaining of the 32 games. Is it UPL 68 to 72%, depending on how hot he is, and then the rest is for them? Is it a little bit less? What are you thinking?
If I was going to ration out, I would say every 3 UPL or every 4 UPL starts, you have 2 to Comrie, 1 to Anderson. I think that maybe 5 for UPL, something around those lines. I would definitely. I would want Comrie to see more than Anderson, but I mean, with the way this guy's playing, I feel like it's almost impossible to keep him out of the net because he just puts up great numbers once in a while.
Yeah, you also want to factor in not only just like the being wrong about this, hopefully, but if a goalie does get injured, which you really don't want for any of the goalies, like it could be the goalie that whatever goalie ends up with the smallest piece of the pie in this thing, based on predictions, like even if that is the goalie to get hurt, you don't want this because then it just puts more strain on everybody else, right? But yeah, I mean, I think you're probably going to look in a situation. I wouldn't be surprised if Malcolm Subban plays a game for the Sabres before the end of the year, just because of how we've had bad luck so far, like with goalies for the past couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm going to leave like a 5% of that puzzle piece. I'm going to leave that to Rochester goaltender is what I'm going to leave that as.
You are a sicko. You are a sicko for that.
I see, like, no, if I'm right, it's like, wow, he's a visionary. But if I'm wrong, like, nobody's going to remember this.
I can't wait till April 13th, Fan Appreciation Day against Ottawa. Malcolm Subban in that. Sabres literally on the dotted line of a playoff spot.
Yeah, I look, I think it probably will be something to the tune of, 67%. I wish I knew, like, if I could do the math real quick, which I can't because my brain doesn't work that fast. But like, if it's 67% UPL, 13% Anderson, that puts me at 80, 18% Comrie, and then, maybe 17%, and then 3% Subban.
So you're at 66% UPL then, because you said you went from UPL and 13% Anderson to
yeah. So it's
UPL. Okay. So you're UPL every 2 out of every 3. 2 out of every 3. Yeah.
Basically, that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
2 out of every 3.
My
like
question.
3 out
so
of
here's
every
so
5
then
and
this
a
is
half.
my last for you. It's April 10th. Let's say everything is held exactly like it has held so far. Everyone performs the same. Do you ride UPL down the stretch? Those last 4 games. You have literally 4 games in 5 days to end the season. That's actually insane. I didn't realize that.
I mean, that's already absurd. UPL's got to see I'd say 3 of them, and then between Comrie and Anderson, whoever you think has been that guy out of the 2 the last month, give him that nod. But I feel like just right now it's got to be Anderson. Like he's been that guy no matter what.
I was gonna say, your last. So I'm trying to think backwards, forwards, right? Mm-hmm. Like just looking at the Buffalo Sabres schedule for the end of the year, to pull a phrase from Rob Ray. It's been a good season for the Buffalo Sabres, but look, your last game of the year is April 14th against the Blue Jackets. That's a team that's struggling, right? That's a game I could see your lesser goalie playing. Now it is the last game of the year, and if that's a winner get in, I think that's an Anderson UPL game. I don't think that's a Comrie game. That game screams Craig Anderson to me. Like that game screams classic Buffalo. Like I'm gonna do what I hate doing this, but I do it all the time. I'm gonna make a Bills comparison. This sounds like a Sean McDermott like dial up like on 2nd and 8, like we're gonna run like the screen that never works, but we're gonna try it this time. Maybe like that's not where I'm meaning to go with this, but like with that said, like it just feels like a game where you get the starting lineup and it's like our starter tonight's Craig Anderson, and you're like, oh no, like why didn't you put UPL in? He's got a .912 save percentage, but it screams Craig Anderson. It screams like 3-2. Now, how electric would it be a 3-2 Sabres overtime victory and to get into the playoffs, right? Wouldn't that be something? But going back in time, though, what I meant to give my original point, your last 4 games of the season are Rangers, Devils, Senators, Blue Jackets. So that's Rangers, good team, Devils, good team, Senators, pretty good team, and then the Blue Jackets were struggling. So to me, that's like a UPL, Comrie, UPL, Anderson to end the year. That if everyone's healthy, that's my prediction.
Okay. It'll be very interesting to see if these predictions hold. Obviously, I think we're all just thankful that it is Super Bowl time and we are still having meaningful discussions about these Buffalo Sabres. Shout out to them. Shout out to the roster. Shout out to the beach bartending staff for getting those shots for Dylan Cozens extension. Shout out to our panel, Gatesy35, V Cristiano 3. Make sure you're following all the awesomeness they have, and make sure you're following everything on Trainwreck Sports, because this is the Crossing Swords podcast, where obviously, as you saw at the gate, our signals sometimes do get crossed, but our swords always are. It's 3 words here. Let's go Sabres.